Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. Last month I did a video about sonnets and I felt that I left a couple of loose ends untied and I just wanted to revisit the subject for a moment. Now, to clear some necessary business out of the way, I should mention I have a couple of books of sonnets. This is my first one of sonnets written sometime in the early 1990s. You can find a copy of it somewhere on Amazon or at some used vendor. And then I think last year or 2 years ago, I wrote what I expect to be my last book, a second series of sonnets. So when I talk about sonnets, I speak as a practitioner. I don't speak as, say, a college professor. So what that means is you should take anything I say with a grain of salt, even as you should were I a college professor. Part of this video is responding to a video by a college professor, E.G. Bartell, who runs a magnificent site called Knowing Poetry. I will put a link to that in the description box. I will put a link to my previous video. Heck, I will put a link to my lulu.com site where you can buy my second set of sonnets. And I don't know anything else that seems relevant. So I remember I showed this lovely Library of America anthology of sonnets and said there are lots of anthologies out there. I wished that I had more of them. I think this might be the only one that I have. But somewhere along the line, I said something about an American sonnet that is not really a sonnet or something. I don't know what I said. I mean, I spoke some denigratory words about this book. I mean, I've said, I think it's conceivable that a unrhymed piece of, say, 14 lines could make a sonnet. Now, I should say sonnets have come down to where we mean 14 lines, generally speaking, rhymed with one of any number of very specific patterns. But Gerard Manley Hopkins tried to invent what he called a curtal or something sonnet, a sonnet of 10 and a half lines or something like that. And initially, at its inception, sonnets could be more than that. They could be different. So these things evolve over time and then get into sort of a fixed state. I just read something about the fu form in Chinese, or rhyme prose, and that was another case. The really oldest versions or iterations were very different to what the form would come to be. And so this is a set of poems. It's kind of a goofy book. It's kind of as a joke. Now, sonnets don't have to have titles. Some do. Generally, if there's a big, long sequence, they don't, but sometimes they do. And one function of a title is it's actually something done for the reader's benefit so that the reader can identify something. And this poet made every single title in the book the same thing. I thought that, they were just putting the title of the book, but no, it's sonnet in singular. And so it's kind of, there must be some kind of point that the author is trying to attain with that, but it's a little bit goofy and a little bit respectful. But he calls these things American sonnets, and I'm not going to say, they're not sonnets, okay? They're 14 lines, they're not rhymed, but I'll read you one that I think really comes closest to what we might call a standard sonnet. I won't, well, I guess it pains me to read this sort of nonsense title, American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin, because every single, and interestingly, when there is an index at the back of the book, the poems are not indexed by their titles, since every single poem has the same title. I mean, sometimes there are legitimate reasons for giving a poem the same title, but mostly not. I think William Blake, Songs of Innocence, Songs of Experience, he has some duplicate titles there. Okay, we'll give Terence Hayes the allowance to do if that's what he wished to do. But let me read one that I think comes sort of close in that it stops. There's a period at line 8. A brother versed in ideological and material swagger seeks dime-ass, trill bitch, starved enough to hang, do-ragged in smoke she can smell and therefore inhale and therefore feel. Must ride shotgun, pouring fountains of bass upon the landscape, must be fat-assed, fearless, and God-fearing, an ancestral insurgent, clean as new money, a cryptographer, a storyteller, a glossy sleeve. There will be a jewelry of wooing. Then, there will be stacks of folded longing amid twilight verbiage in parking lots, smelling of live wire, liquor, hot air, and fire. Accompany a brother. Shout outs to vixens and bitches out there twerking for fucks in Bluff Estates, Washington Park, Starlight, Shop Road, Joe Frazier, Harlem Street. This is Daddy's boy who wanted. So that's just an example. I mean, I won't dispute. He wants to call it a sonnet. If you want to write a quatrain of ABBA, just one single quatrain, one word per line or 7 words per line, whatever, and you want to call it, fine, go ahead. I mean, that's fine. It really doesn't bother me. But to call it an American sonnet is going too far. And that was the topic of my last video. I demonstrated the 3 types of sonnet, and I will do it again just as quick as I can. So the first was, what was the first? Italianate. English, I guess. And American. So, Italianate, English, and American. And I said the Italianate is sometimes referred to as Petrarchian after Petrarch. And the English is sometimes referred to as Shakespearean after Shakespeare. And the American may as well be called Mackayan after Mackay. Okay? Now, Petrarch, I don't know that he invented the Italianate sonnet. He may well have done, but I don't think he did. And Shakespeare definitely did not invent the English sonnet. And Mackay, as far as I know, he did invent the American sonnet, but I don't know. Nobody has disputed me since the last video. And then I pointed out that each one has its own rhyme scheme. And I went into more detail in that previous video, but we'll say Petrarch. So Petrarch was ABBA, ABBA, CD, 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 or something. Now this can vary. The bottom part, the octet, can vary, I believe. So that can vary. And then Shakespeare was A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and then G, G. And then the Mackay goes A, B, C, D, B, C, D, A, E, F, G, F, G, E. So there's the Mackay. And I put a double line to show the break. Sometimes there's an octet and a sestet, so 8 lines and then 6 lines. The Italianate has that as well. The English does not, though they can be written so as to honor that division. It's not necessary, and actually in any of them, it's not necessary at all. The teachers will tell you to put a turn or a volta there. It's not necessary at all. So these are the basic sonnet forms. I have written all of those. I talked about that in the previous video. I thought that I would read a few sonnets from the American sonnet master, Claude McKay. So of the well, I've got the basic Shakespearean one here. This is pretty famous. America. Although she feeds me bread of bitterness and sinks into my throat her tiger's tooth, stealing my breath of life, I will confess I love this cultured hell that tests my youth. Her vigor flows like tides into my blood, giving me strength erect against her hate. Her bigness sweeps my being like a flood, yet as a rebel fronts a king in state, I stand within her walls with not a shred of terror, malice, not a word of jeer. Darkly I gaze into the days ahead and see her might and granite wonders there, beneath the touch of time's unerring hand, like priceless treasures sinking in the sand. My first book of sonnets has a sonnet that makes reference to that. So for the Italianate, I'll go with one called To Winter. I don't know if he did many of these. This is the only one that I really know of. This is the ideal book to have Claude McKay. I had his complete poems, and I regrettably, but money was tight in those days, I returned it because I couldn't stand it and got my money back. Now, of course, you have to pay much more than it was back then. But be that as it may. But he also had, early on, he started with dialect poems. And for me, this is the meat of McKay. So, To Winter. Stay, season of calm love and soulful snows. There is a subtle sweetness in the sun. The ripples on the stream's breast gaily run. The wind more boisterously by me blows. And each succeeding day now longer grows. The birds a gladder music have begun. The squirrel, full of mischief and of fun, from maple's topmost branch the brown twig throws. I read these pregnant signs, know what they mean. I know, cool winter, you intend to go. Oh, stay! I fled a land where fields are green always, and palms wave gently to and fro, and winds are balmy, blue brooks ever sheen, to ease my heart of its impassioned woe. So, not, to my mind, his best sonnet, but nothing wrong with it. And then, thirdly, one in the American style. This is called Moscow. Moscow, for many loving her, was dead. And yet I saw a bright Byzantine fair of jeweled buildings, pillars, domes, and spires, of hues prismatic, dazzling to the sight, a glory painted on the eastern air, of amorous sounding tones like passionate lyres, all colors laughing richly their delight and reigning over all the color red. My memory bears engraved the high-walled Kremlin, of halls symbolic of the tiger will, of czarist instruments of mindless law. And often now my nerves throb with the thrill, when in that gilded place I felt and saw the presence and the simple voice of Lenin. So documenting his excursion there. And I think somewhere along the line in that last video, I said, if you're going to write a Shakespearean, keep the first 8 congruous with the second 6. So do it exactly as Shakespeare did. Don't put a different bottom on it. But here's just for an added bonus. Here's a poem by Mackay. The first half, or the octet, is Shakespearean, and then he adds something more Italianate as the sestet, and it's masterful. So it just goes to show you, you can do pretty much anything. And this one does have a title as well, St. Isaac's Church, Petrograd. Bow down, my soul, in worship very low, and in the holy silences be lost. Bow down before the marble man of woe. Bow down before the singing angel host. What jeweled glory fills my spirit's eye? What golden grandeur moves the depths of me? The soaring arches lift me up on high, taking my breath with their rare symmetry. Bow down, my soul, and let the wondrous light of beauty bathe thee from her lofty throne. Bow down before the wonder of man's might. Bow down in worship, humble and alone. Bow lowly down before the sacred sight of man's divinity alive in stone. So sometimes you mix things up and you get an indelible masterpiece. So that's how it went with Mackay. But that one that I read that I said was an American sonnet, I think it is kind of a bit of disrespect to be calling these American sonnets, disrespectful of Mackay. I don't think any kind of even nod is made to Mackay in this book, who is the preeminent sonneteer of his day in America. Mention is made of Langston Hughes. So there's that. I don't want to spend too much time on this thing. Now, E.G. Bartell, in his video, made an interesting point, and he said there was a book out, and he made a review. I'll link that. Eugene Nadelman by Michael Weingard, and I looked to see if it would be possible to get that from the Chicago Public Library. No, you can't get things at the library. You can't get anything by Michael Weingard at the public library. But he went on to explain that the novel was it was a verse novel employing a stanza form invented by Alexander Pushkin. And so, since I couldn't obtain the book by Michael Weingard, I decided to get The Golden Gate by Vikram Seth. I checked it out from the library. I had it many years ago. I owned a copy and got rid of it. It's not a particular favorite of mine. And that is because of the stanza. And what is used as a stanza, now I seem to have lost my marker, so I will just have to do it in pen. Well, anyhow, these are not really legitimate as standalone sonnets anyhow. E.G. Bartel believes they could be, and I suppose somebody can come along and do it. I mean, Claude McKay, were he living, could probably do it. So don't, as I say, don't take anything I say as chiseled in granite or even carved into a wooden door. No, you have to go by your own judgment on that. But the Pushkin model, which is also the model used by Vikram Seth, is I'm getting down to the bottom of the page, so it's kind of hard to see that, but it's ABAB, so Shakespearean, CCDD, which is couplets, EFFE, which is Italianate, and then GG. Those don't look like G's, but I did the best I could. So the problem with this as a standalone sonnet is just that it is simply ugly. It's, yeah, you want some kind of symmetry, you want some kind of balance, you want some kind of pattern. And this lacks all of that. Now, it has its advantages as a stanza form. It gives the poet or the writer really something to work with and have fun with all along the way, because he can write a Shakespearean, he can write a couple of couplets, he can write Italianate, and then another couplet. So it gives him just something to have fun with as he moves the story along. And the point of a novel is telling of the story. So you don't really need any kind of beautiful form. And as a writer of regular sonnets, it's not the poet's objective to put beauty into his lines. The form should take care of that itself, insofar as we find it so. And then, of course, there will be other things which only add to it, like alliteration and what were the ones we had to learn? Onomatopoeia and blah, 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 assonance and consonant, blah, blah, blah. Whatever, you know. But there's a very marvelous essay, and I think it's the essay that T.S. Eliot wrote about Rudyard Kipling, where he goes into the difference between verse and poetry. There is no hard line between verse and poetry, but there is definitely a distinction. And this, now where did I put it? This novel by Vikram Seth is most certainly a verse novel, and I think that's exactly what it is called. Let's see if there's anything here. A novel in verse. So it explicitly does not say a poem. It does not say an epic poem. It says a novel in verse. And so he is basically taking, if you want to know who a ver-sifier is, a preeminent example would be somebody like Robert Service, the Canadian poet. A jingler, a rhyme rustler, as he called himself. Very good at what he did, don't get me wrong. And so, I mean, this is taking that idea and expanding it. So this is kind of funny, actually, because the entire book is done. So he's got the author bio is actually, he wrote it into one of these sonnet-like stanzas. The acknowledgments are also done in a sonnet-like stanza. The copyright information is not. The dedication is done as a sonnet-like stanza. The contents even, he made the titles so that they would combine together into a sonnet of its own. And then the book starts. Let me read you the first one, so you can get a sense of how this is a novel. It's going to be telling a story. To make a start more swift than weighty, hail muse. Dear reader, once upon a time, say circa 1980, there lived a man. His name was John. Successful in his field, though only 26, respected, lonely. One evening as he walked across Golden Gate Park, the ill-judged toss of a red frisbee almost brained him. He thought, if I died, who'd be sad? Who'd weep? Who'd gloat? Who would be glad? Would anybody? As it pained him, he turned from this dispiriting theme to ruminations less extreme. I don't think I need to read any more of that for you to see how that's magnificently executed verse. I mean, Seth is masterful. He is just sublime at what he does. I have a book of translations by him of Chinese poetry, which is wonderful. And I have a book forthcoming of some sort of Indian poem, which I know nothing about. So that will be coming, and I'm sure I will be reading it. And sometimes talents of this ability who do not have the poetic substance of their own to write about do very well with translations. So I would certainly seek out any translation by Vikram Seth that I could. I think Richard Wilbur is another one like that. His translations of plays by Molière and Racine and I think Cornell tend to outshine most of his own verse or poetry, though he did make a couple of masterful, excelling poems. And as you know, my standard is one masterful, excelling poem is enough. You are the bomb. You know, you are it. So that's how I look at things. But I don't know that Vikram Seth did. He seems to have stayed at this sort of more mundane level of storytelling. The thing with poetry is that the lines have to be able to flow back and forth. The meaning, the sense has to flow back and forth over itself. And in something like this, it doesn't. It just flows in one direction as though it were prose. But I was never able to get through it. I was off-put by the ugliness of the form itself, but his mastery of the idiom, of the prosody is, well, I did see one little thing, but it's one little thing that we all do once in a while. But it's really impeccable. It's flawless or nigh flawless. So it's really a good piece for study, but I would not take any one of these as a standalone sonnet. In fact, let me read. Should I do the dedication or I'll do the acknowledgments. My debts are manifold and various. First, Stanford University, where with progressively precarious nurture, my tardy PhD has waxed and waxes lax and sickly. Second, to friends who've read this, quickly advised me to desist and cease, or burbled what a masterpiece, or smoothed my steps with sage suggestion. Third, to John and Susan Hughes, for refuge, friendship, ears, and views. And fourth, to you, who did not question the crude credentials of this verse, but backed your brashness with your purse. So very delightful, very sweet. I mean, can't fault him at all. And certainly the world is a better place with this kind of stuff in it. I should mention just one other form. I've also mentioned that I have a book called The Soul's Refinement. This is another one you would have to go to Amazon or a used dealer somewhere to get, which employs the sonnet as a stanza form. And in this case, I use one of the acceptable sonnet forms, one of the traditional ones. Now, the one that Pushkin devised and that untold peoples, including Michael Weingard and Vikram Seth have used, does have some tradition, the weight of some oomph behind it. But I used one of the forms that stands on its own as a sonnet, as a stanza. Now, none of the things in this book can be, none of the segments of 14 lines can be read as an individual sonnet. It's not possible. I think Bartel said in rhyming poems of 14 lines each, talking about Pushkin, the work as a whole is not consisting of separate poems. That's not how it works. But I'm not here to quibble with Bartel. As I say, he's got a magnificent channel, a lovely backlog of very insightful and instructive videos about many different topics in the world of poetry. So I urge you to go visit his site and watch everything, okay? But, so this book is written in the end, and there are two other books just like it. You'll find the word The Soul, and those you can get at the lulu.com page, which is linked. But anyhow, that's neither here nor there. There is one other that I should make some mention to, and that is, I mean, it's not like using the sonnets as a stanza is a new thing. When I wrote my books, I had not invented that. I had, of course, seen it in Dante first. So his famous one from the Vita Nuova, number 19, ladies refined and sensitive in love, I wish to speak with you about my lady. So this is the Mark Musa translation, just absolutely lovely. And it's kind of confusing how it is subdivided. Okay, so here is what Dante has. And keep in mind that that Italian has a greater ease or number of rhymes available to the poet. So that seems kind of excessive, and it would be indeed if we did. That's why writers in English don't tend to do the Italianate or Petrarchian sonnet that much, but John Keats did, and many others have done and excelled with it. So it's certainly possible to do. But we tend to fall back on the English, and I would say the American is just as good. There are certain subjects or themes that it is better than the Shakespearean in handling. But this form by Dante, you can see it's a little bit unwieldy. As with this, I suppose you could make a standalone sonnet with either of these. It would be kind of ugly. And so that's my objection to either of those. It's an aesthetic argument. And this, I don't think that this succumbs to ugliness in the same way, because no effort was made to form any kind of pattern or symmetry. He just decided to forego that kind of exercise. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong in doing that. Writers of poetry should take their inspiration as it comes to them. Though I have to say, I did make one kind of a mistake in reading his. So Vikram Seth, his table of contents, I mentioned that the contents form a sonnet of their own. So you see, I don't think you want me to read that, but I'll hold it a little bit so you can see what he's doing. And this book, because he did that goofy thing about having every poem have the same title, so the poems had to be indexed by their first lines, and then for no good reason the index was done in 14-line blocks as well. And so I mistakenly read one of these as a sonnet, and I'll read it to you. I mean, as what he refers to as an American sonnet. Glad someone shot deserved to be shot finally. You have a gun, but to use the bullet, when I am nowhere near a ledge or knife covered, I cut myself on some glass in the water. When MLK was shot, his blood changed to change. Later, the white boy we once beat like a drum. It was discovered the best way to combat, but there never was a black male hysteria in a parallel world where all Doctor Who's overaged, overgrave, overlooked brother. I only intend to send word to my future. In the saddest part of the story, the brother says, I remember my sister's last hurrah. When I am close enough, I am reminded. So that is his index, mistakenly read as a sonnet, and sad enough to say it reads about as well as any of the sonnets in the book itself. So that is just one more reason, I think, to at least give some attention, if you can, when you attempt to write a sonnet, to putting some form and some kind of regularity into your poem so that the unwary reader does not mistake it for something else, or does not mistake it for something else. some of these I can't read because I would probably get taken off of YouTube for the vocabulary. Well, I'll read another one. I'll forego the title because they all have the same title. For her last birthday, I found in a used New Jersey toy store a 6-inch Amiri Baraka action figure with 3 different outfits, an elaborately colored dashiki with afro pick, a black linen Leninist getup, and a sports coat with elbow patches and wool kangol. Accessories include an ink pen and his father's pistol. If you dip him in bathwater, he will leak the names of his abandoned children. Pull a string, he sings preface to a 20-volume suicide note, sweeter than the sweetest alto to ever sing in the boys' choir of Harlem. The store clerk tried selling me the actual 20-volume note Leroy Jones wrote the night before Baraka put a bullet in him. I would have bought it, but I had no room in my suitcase. So that is the kind of thing that requires or will require soon enough a multitude of footnotes. You will not be able to pick that up and understand what he is talking about without a lot of reference points explained. In that respect, of course, Claude McKay, anything he wrote survives and will survive without that external apparatus. I should just read something by him to close off so that it's I'm looking for a sonnet, of course. Oh, maybe I can. Oh. This is called Techuan. I think that's how you would say it. And this is an American sonnet or a Macayan sonnet. Morocco conquering homage paid to Spain, and the Alhambra lifted up its towers. Africa's fingers tipped with miracles and quivering with Arabian designs, traced words and figures like exotic flowers. Sultana's chambers of rare tapestries, filigree marvels from Quranic lines, mosaics chanting notes like tropic rain. And Spain repaid the tribute ages after to Techuan, that fort of struggle and strife, where chagrined Andalusian Moors retired. She brought a fountain bubbling with new life, whose jeweled charm won even the native pride and filled it sparkling with flamenco laughter. So you can see that I have not done much preparatory work on this. I just grabbed the books and read them as they came to hand. So I hope that ties up any ends left dangling from my previous video, which again I will link to in the description box. Thank you for stopping by my channel.